Ambitious is an understatement when Konami followed in Mario's footsteps in bringing a classic NES franchise to the Game Boy. So dark and cinematic was the atmosphere of the unholy trilogy, at a time when video games were still pretty cartoonish. To match that on a handheld would have been a massive achievement. You play as Christopher Belmont, forefather to Simon, as he tries to vanquish Dracula for the final time, again. Canonically, this game takes place 100 years after the events of Dracula's Curse, and 120 before Simon's first two outings. The storyboard is not a long one. There are only 4 stages, however the levels are long and drawn out, which is only reinforced by the lethargy at which Christopher Belmont walks. Think the original Castlevania game at around 70% speed. Maybe this creative decision was made in order to compensate for the dot matrix blur. Also, there is a noticeable input lag where pressing A does not instantaneously make Christopher jump, but a split second later. It's not a huge thing, but means your reflexes need to be that much sharper. Whipping things mid-jump takes a fair bit of getting down. The levels follow the usual theme, starting off in the forest approaching Dracula's castle, working your way deeper within until the usual final showdown. Along the way, some of the most exquisitely detailed backgrounds are on show, from the woodlands and graveyards to castle halls and armories. As you would expect from an 8-bit Castlevania game, there are some awkward, almost pixel-perfect jumps to make, but thankfully they held back on the pain. As long as you keep moving, it's usually obvious what you need to do. There are no stairs, which could be construed as a good thing, considering this franchise's early history with annoying stairs. Rather, to move up and down, often you need to climb or descend ropes, like some torturous gym class. While on the rope, you can't whip anything though, which can lead you to occasionally take cheap damage. The levels follow the normal jump and whip routine, except for stage 3. Here, there are fewer enemies. Instead, the player must traverse a series of moving spike wall platforming sections. This part really highlights the drawn-out nature of the game. The jumps between rope sections are pretty precise, and for the most part, touching any part of the encroaching spikes is an instant death. This goes on for a good 5 minutes, with no room for error. You can't rush the auto-scrolling either. Jump too soon and you'll die just as if you jump too late. It's sadistic, but also strangely tense and exciting. The music, as you would expect, is a real highlight in Castlevania the Adventure. The series, with barely an exception, has stunned audiences with every new iteration on any platform, with its anthemic melodies lying somewhere between power metal and rock opera, with just the right amount of gothic. Each of the 4 stages has its own theme, and while the motifs aren't taken from any other Castlevania game previous to this, they can undeniably belong only to one franchise. You can power up your whip twice by collecting orbs. The first extends the range and damage of your whip, and the second fires a projectile, which is invaluable when collecting otherwise inaccessible extra lives. Get hit though, and you lose a level. Twice, and you're back to the basic whip. This makes the bosses damn hard because dodging is so difficult. Your movement speed and slightly too large hitbox means you'll probably want the extra range and stay further away for the most part. The sub-weapons are sadly omitted, leaving collectible hearts to actually mean health for a change, but you can pick up strategically placed invincibility, which helps you pass some of the more annoying sections safely. There isn't a great deal of enemy variation. You probably see only around 10 different antagonists, none of whom are particularly tricky to kill. It wouldn't be a Castlevania game without the dreaded bats, of course, and their movement patterns are the only slightly unpredictable ones. Otherwise, enemies are quite manipulatable, like the birds. If you jump just as they start to dive bomb you, they'll fly straight over your head and off the screen. Gone are the Medusa heads and skeletons, and apart from Dracula, you don't fight any traditional bosses. A notable omission is death. It feels like something is missing without the Reaper featuring somewhere. Ambitious, yes, but Konami was restrained enough that Castlevania the Adventure works for the most part. They were unlikely to get everything right the first time around. The original NES title was by no means perfect either, but we were given an early treat with this one. Get past the flaws, and what you're retrospectively left with is a framework, a promise of what they could do. Sit tight and remember, 1991 was not far away.